Hi everyone, my name's Ian.
And I am Eric.
Great. Finally, after all of these weeks of doing Andy and Iain Talk Networking, finally I get to be first. Iain and now Erik Talk Networking. Andy is off enjoying himself on a well-deserved vacation or holiday where he comes from in the UK, like I used to say. Bottom line is, yep, we're still here. We're still doing our little chats. And the topic for today, which Erik has generously agreed to talk to me about, which is why AI matters in network observability. But this is really based on the announcement yesterday of the HPE Juniper merger, and I saw a quote by Bob Friday from Juniper, and it said, "Without AI native networking technology, most IT teams are always in reaction mode dealing with the latest crisis." And I thought this was a perfect discussion point for Erik and I to talk about. But before we get to that, Erik, what do you do at cPacket?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on the show. Let's see. My primary objective is field CTO, and what that means is I work with our current CTO, who's been here a long time and really understands the space really well, Ron Naveau, and but I also overlay with the sales team. So I'm sort of an extension of his brilliance and knowledge and learnings, and I'm applying that into actual customer use cases and opportunities where we can really showcase the value of the offering. The other thing I do is assist with strategy and really thinking about the journey that we are on as we onboard new technologies and like we're talking about today, but also how do we help the company grow and expand and really continue the current growth trajectory that we're on.
Wow. That's great, Erik. So you are the absolutely best person to answer this question.
Oh,
Why
I don't know about
AI
that.
matters in network observability. What would be your kind of opening thoughts for folks listening to this presentation?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, it's super interesting because HPE and Juniper coming together, two bigs making a bigger, really presents an industry, I would say, shift where you're seeing consolidation happen to compete prior with the shift of workloads moving to the cloud. Now, what we're seeing is the growth of the data center really powered by the AI workloads themselves and the shift to agentic workflows really impacting really the core business. It's no longer just chat gpt. Now this is getting in pushed down to the edge. It's getting closer and closer to the customer. It's becoming core to the business. That shift is really driving a lot more networking workloads. And so I think it's very timely that this merger is happening because it's also indicating an opportunity to drive more equipment at the edge and also into these modernized data centers.
Okay. So what's your thought in terms of how that will impact NetOps teams specifically? So we've got increasing data centers, so that's probably quite good for NetOps teams and their value to the business. But obviously also larger, more complex, quite different workloads in terms of their kind of operational characteristics. So what are you imagining in terms of that connection to the NetOps team? What should they be thinking at this time?
Well, it's a very interesting question because I think those that are in it, in other words, they're on the day-to-day front lines, right? And we see this very. This has been happening over time, right? Cloud technologies increase the surface area, APIs increase the amount of data, melt, and what we see currently with things like Prometheus generating stream logs and just volumes and volumes of data that it's not physically possible for an operator to process that much data. First of all, where is it coming from? Where does it go? How do I store it? How do I reason over it? And how do I get the insights that I need? And that's initially where, the Splunk world really expanded. And then on the Meld side, it became, Datadog, Dynatrace, and they were really gathering even more insights. But this is where the advent of AIOps came in, where you have to provide improved context and you have to use things like machine learning in order to reduce the noise to get to the signal. And so a lot of those problems were being addressed by an ecosystem approach, different tools, different products that helped along that, let's call it the data journey, if you will, with the customer. And that made sense, particularly when you shifted the workload to cloud and you no longer had access to the infrastructure. You had to have these, different data feeds or CloudWatch or what have you. And now, as though a lot of those either repatriated workloads are coming back to the data center or new workloads like GPU workloads and larger storage systems are being deployed, it's actually amplifying. We're kind of almost back to that. But what's happening is there's a few other things that are different right now. One is that nanoseconds matter now. It used to be like, we could do minute polling, or, and if it was S&P, it was 5 minute polling,
Those were
and
the days, Erik. Those were
those were
the
the
days.
days, right? 15 to 5 minute polling. Now it's, if you're not finding the signal through the noise in sub-second, you are missing the real critical impacts. And that applies both to NetOps, but also to SecOps, right? It's also security related issues happen at wire speed now. And so I think what shifted from the days of old to now is speed. In this show, we see this with 400 at the core. A lot of enterprises are currently at 100, and now as they're deploying newer optics, newer fiber data centers, or multi data center, they're using 400 core, which stresses a lot of those systems. They can't handle the volume of data. So I think, AI has made networking cool again. It would be the punchline, because these workloads are moving more and more data over new infrastructure, which is also providing data. So the first sort of to answer your question, managing the volume and speed of data has gotten even harder now.
Okay, so apart from dabbing the tears from our eyes in terms of this kind of pressure that the teams are now under, what are a couple of just practical things based on your experience and the things you're seeing that NetOps folks really should be actively doing to be able to start answering that some of those challenges, some of those rallying calls, as you said, uh, huge increases in terms of network performance and the demands that's placing on tools. That's one huge area. Obviously, kind of new workloads entirely, kind of new needs. So what would be just a couple of just a practical few things, Erik, that you've seen that that NetOps team should be thinking about or maybe actively doing to be able to kind of
Yep.
get ahead of some of this curve?
Yeah. So I've got four answers to that question.
Four. Oh my goodness. Great.
And we can break it into sub points. I think the meta point though is put your data to work, right? In other words, all of that data, although it being potentially noisy, also has all the insights in it if you process it appropriately.
Right.
So the first recommendation is make sure that you have the right data and that you're enriching that data with business context, right? And so an example would be, if you have a critical link and you know that it could be a redundant link, it could have multiple failover points, but you also know that if something's not happening, perhaps with even things like your routing, or you've got some sort of logic in your switching design that is potentially going to create a choke point, you need to be able to pull the data out and contextualize that data so that you know that this mission critical application, this zero downtime, business app has to work and it flows over these particular links. Make sure that you've identified that data aligns with that application because that is business critical. So leveraging context is the first thing. The second thing is around surfacing up from the volume of data using AI technology to provide the right level of insights, right? And so that's an interesting point. Right level insight. That means it's something that's, let's call it abnormal, based on some baseline. And this was where we are using in our solution different technologies to be able to identify and surface up anomalies because of there's no human that can handle the volume that we see. And then also as we roll that up to the application, that's where that AI powered insight really needs to shine. Those are the first two. I'll pause there. Any questions on those?
No, no, I think they're both really excellent suggestions. And as I say, I think the point is that even in those first two, there is hope for
There's
for the
hope, but it's
teams that are going to
actually,
be
it's
hopeful.
interesting in the AI world. There's one skill set that's now becoming very clear that if you don't have this skill set, it's going to be a harder road, and that is creativity,
Right, yes. Yeah, good point.
right? Because what we know about prompting and what we know about the different models is that the more explicit you are, the more that you tell it, the more it learns, the more it becomes smarter. And so this is actually an interesting thing is that you have to get creative of how to, train or surface or, really apply what we have is great modern technology, but how you apply it creatively can be innovative, right?
Yeah.
So across the 4 points I raised, once you have these anomalies, once you understand what's deviating from norm, if it's a security spike in malware traversing your network, or if it's an application that's doing lateral movement that's really impacting in these choke points, or you've got QoS things that have not been identified or tuned properly, and now you're starting to see congestion and lost packets. Those types of things can get surfaced up with the points one and two. The next thing is how you get that data, again, back to the theme of putting the data to work, is how you integrate it into your tooling ecosystem. Things that you have, other processes, right? This is where it's essential that we're able to say, get this information to the right person, or more importantly, add this information to other information that I can now contextualize. And this is where actually SecOps and NetOps, SecOp and NetOps are going to collaborate. Is that all of a sudden a network spike could be related to a security issue. It could be
Mm,
something
right.
that is impacting the profile of the business, or creating a vulnerability, a 0-day vulnerability that could all of a sudden now be having not just a performance problem. This is actually a business impact
Yeah.
from a compliance or regulatory, or more importantly, like you might be losing data, ransomware, whatever it is, denial of service, that could be business service impacting. So until you get that data, those insights to other platforms within your tool ecosystem, that's essential. So that's number three. And number four is really connecting all the dots together, right? And what we say is, how are you doing your business workflows? And that is essential to taking those insights and the integrations and now powering your business. And the best customers that we see do this have a plan at the workflow level, and then all of a sudden everything starts to connect together.
I think that's fantastic, Erin. Very insightful. And I think really that idea of the creativity, I think using that word is very powerful for folks, in a space where there has been a lot of sameness for a long time. Stability was king, all of those types of things. And I think, thinking differently about your business processes, thinking differently about the data that is available through tools like cPackets and obviously other kinds of tools, to think how you can best impact your business and how best you can work with those folks over the wall in the SecOps team is
Yeah.
really going to be powerful.
Yeah, if I could end on one point, I would just say choose your vendors wisely.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that we see, and you know this about our business, is we're connected with our customers. You know, we're a small startup that's really doing great things with bigs. But the reason why we've been growing so much is because a lot of the legacy providers now under private equity, now being debt raced to the bottom and raising prices on renewals and all of the other things, they're losing connection with the customer. They're not creating and innovating with the customer.
Right.
And so one of the things that is really important as you think about modernizing for these new data centers is, do you have access to your vendor? Can
Mm.
you get access to someone like like you who has so much domain knowledge about our portfolio as well as how other customers have used it? And that's where we're collaborating together to create customer value. Is your vendor creative? Is your vendor providing suggestions? Is your vendor innovating and using these new technologies? And that's a really good question to be asking as we're going through a lot of the people who are retiring that have this domain knowledge. We're going to be dependent on these systems, but you're going to be even more dependent on your supplier and your business partnerships.
Absolutely correct. Right. We're going to end it all there, Erik. I really appreciate your time. As Andy likes to say, to like and subscribe. If the content is good, if you're finding it interesting, if you want to hear more from Erik, for example, then feel free to reach out. We'd love to be able to have that conversation, or if you want to go a little bit further on one of Erik's 4 points, that would be really exciting. Anyway, thank you very much for listening
Thanks for having me.
Iain and Erik Talk Networking, and have a great day, and we'll talk soon. Bye for now.
Bye bye.